Welcome to the Explainer. You know, tuberculosis has been with humanity for ages, but here's the thing. We've had a solid cure for decades. So why is it still such a global killer? Today, we're diving into a really powerful strategy called DOT. We're going to break down how we fight not just the TB bacteria, but something just as tough, human nature.
So let's start with this puzzle, right? We have the medicine. It can cure tuberculosis in about 6 months, and yet TB is still a massive global threat. How does that make any sense? Well, the answer isn't really in the drugs themselves. It's in the psychology and, the real, messy challenges of everyday life. At the very heart of this problem, it's not about how well the drugs work. It's about making sure a patient actually takes their medicine consistently for a very long time. In public health, we call this the adherence puzzle. It's really just a way of asking, how well does a person's behavior, like taking their pills, actually match what their doctor recommended? I mean, just think about it for a second. Taking a handful of pills every single day for more than 180 days straight. You have to keep doing it, even weeks or months after you start feeling perfectly fine again. That is the challenge that millions of patients are up against, and let me tell you, it is a huge test of endurance.
And when you look at why people stop, the reasons are just so human. It makes total sense. You start to feel better, so you think, hey, I must be cured. Or maybe the pills themselves have side effects that make you feel awful. Or, life just happens. You can't afford the trip to the clinic, you absolutely cannot miss a day of work, or you just forget. This isn't about people lacking willpower, it's about real-world hurdles that anyone would struggle with.
And this quote really gets to the core of it. A patient can understand perfectly why they need to finish their medication. But there's this huge gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it day in and day out for 6 months. And it's in that gap that a totally treatable disease can spiral into a crisis. So, let's talk about what happens when a patient stops their treatment too soon. The stakes here are incredibly high, and not just for that one person, but for the entire global community. When treatment is cut short, not all the TB bacteria are killed off. And the ones that survive, they're usually the toughest, most resilient ones. They don't just stick around, they multiply. And as they do, they can evolve into something far, far harder to fight. And this, right here, this brings us to the single biggest threat that comes from non-adherence: drug-resistant tuberculosis. The bacteria that survive basically learn how to withstand the very drugs we designed to kill them. And what that creates is a new strain of TB that is way more complicated, way more expensive, and takes so much longer to treat. We're talking up to 2 years, with outcomes that are a lot less certain. Okay, so to close that dangerous gap between knowing and doing, and to stop drug resistance before it can even start, the global health community, with the World Health Organization leading the way, really zeroed in on a powerful, standardized solution. It's called Directly Observed Treatment, or DOT for short. The idea is actually pretty simple, but it's incredibly powerful. A healthcare worker, or even a trained member of the community, physically watches the patient take their medicine every single time. It's a way to absolutely ensure that every single dose is taken exactly as it's supposed to be.
But, and this is so important, DOT is not about policing patients. If you think of it as just surveillance, you're missing the whole point. Fundamentally, this is a system of care. It's about human support.
The best way to think about DOT is like a bridge. So on one side of the bridge, you've got the patient and all their daily struggles, the long treatment, the side effects, the cost. And on the other side, you've got these non-negotiable public health goals: cure the patient, prevent drug resistance, and protect the community. DOT is the structure that connects those two sides. It builds a pathway to success for everyone. And this philosophy just changes the entire dynamic. The conversation isn't, why didn't you take your medicine? It becomes, what can we do to help you get through this and succeed? It's that shift from blame to support that makes the whole system work. You're building a human connection that helps patients get through the really tough days. So, in practice, what does this supportive structure actually do? Well, it guarantees the 3 rights of effective therapy. It makes sure the patient gets the right drugs in the right dose at the right time. It takes away all the guesswork and potential for human error, and just creates this solid foundation for recovery. Okay, so we've laid out the problem and we've laid out the strategy. But what about the real-world impact? Why has DOT become the gold standard for TB treatment all around the globe?
Well, the outcomes are incredibly clear and powerful. Programs that use DOT see cure rates go way, way up.
They basically act like a firewall, preventing those deadly drug-resistant strains from ever emerging. By making sure patients finish their treatment, DOT protects their families, their neighbors, the whole community. It gives them a lifeline of support, and ultimately it just stops tuberculosis right at the source.
So in the end, you see that DOT is more than just a clinical strategy. It's a promise. It's a promise of support to the person who's sick, and it's a promise of safety to the entire community. But it only works if we commit the resources and the people to make it a reality everywhere. So the question we're left with is this. In a world with so many competing priorities, how do we make sure this simple, life-saving promise is never, ever broken?